Hello. So, I know there's so much live recently. Does anyone remember when I just lose my shit when people walked into the room and I couldn't live at all? My health things have changed. Okay. So today I am introducing the Habits of Action protocol. So how to organize yourself and your mind to allow for you to grow forward and do the thing. So if you've been around this week, I've done a couple presentations. On Tuesday, I talked about or shared the alternative sentences relative to this and iterated that action is our natural state. It's not to say that rest is not an action, but generally we are ready and willing to go forward. Except for where we are blocked. And rather than create a conversation around how to force yourself to do things, what I'm attempting to do here is to kind of like peel off the layers of misperception that hold you apart from the task in a way that it seems like unimportant or impossible. And when I'm talking about actions or tasks, this could be something that's like acute, like a one-time thing, or like just tiny and adorable, or it could be something that is like a chronic or pattern type activity where you are looking to adopt a new way of interacting with your body through nutrition or fitness. But really what I'm looking at, and this could be blocks to productivity around doing your project, like writing your book or launching this campaign or doing this thing or another. So the categories I suggested yesterday were professional, personal, and purpose. And what I suggested considering was, can you enlarge in the purpose circle to encompass tasks that would fall under professional or personal headers? And the reason that would be to connect with the idea, really just acknowledge and accept that while your life appears to be siloed, it's still your life. Your experience at work or professionally, and I designate professionally as things you do for money, and purpose would be like things you do for joy, and personal would be like everything else. To me, there's no reason why those personal and professional designations should be exclusive of joy. Like, why can't that be included? So I have come at this topic very metaphysically. Perhaps I missed the mark, but this is what's true to me, and this is what I've seen in practice. I have been working with people since 2013 to facilitate behavior change. Originally, it started out in fitness and nutrition, and then it expanded to emotional intelligence and personal task management, and then expanded further to be around alignment or connecting with your inner voice. And now, basically, all of it rolls up to like, if you can love yourself, you can do fucking anything. So what I'm presenting in this Habits of Action protocol is really a gateway to acceptance of self, and through that gateway, all actions that are relevant to you can be taken. So the first step in this protocol is to restore your identity. Remember who the fuck you are. Who are you? What is this? This to me is whenever we allow for the possibility that in this quantum field, there is nothing that is not you. And when you call something outside of yourself as necessary, I need to do this to get this, I need to do this, I need to be this to get that, you are saying you're not everything. And that might work for some people in some amounts, but the people that I attract, they're generally like bosses, like highly energetically charged people. And anytime you are in denial of self, you are basically in denial of all that is, and that's kind of like turning off your power source. So in restoring your identity, what I'm asking you to do is first consider the love that you already are. Most things that we want to get or do are to soothe ideas we have around safety, and that could be psyche safety. Am I good enough to be loved? Or it could be physical safety. Am I going to have access to resources? And this is, again, like kind of a tangential approach to behavior change, but being in the field for this long, I wish it was harder. I wish there was something I could sell you that was more complicated than this. But honestly, if you can relax and just ask that question open-mindedly, you'd be surprised at what happens. The next step, so we'll start to, as we move through the steps, there are 5 in this protocol. The 5th step is sketching the ramp, which is the actual like meat and potatoes, like how do you do the thing? And that's something that's very grounded, like in 3D on earth, meaning like you can touch it, your grandma would recognize it, it's like tangible. But as we build towards that, the steps will become more and more concrete. But the first one I recognize is really abstract, and you might have resistance to it. And if you do, just skip it. Then it's not for you right now. The next step is to scan for myths to bust. And in the article that supports this, that's on patreon.com/habitbook, I break myths into 3 categories: the thing or the task, the self, and the world. And when I'm talking about myths, basically what I'm saying is the way that you have the thing organized in your mind is different than it actually is in reality. And that would be, I called it in the videos this week, task, if we talk about thing myths, I call it task dysmorphia. And it's basically the way that you are perceiving the task is bigger, scarier, more ambiguous, and impossible than it actually is in real life. And this happens if we've encountered things that we're uncomfortable and we're like, we take notes inside our head. We're like, ooh, don't do that again because it sucks your energy and blah. Or you might not know what to do after this step, and then what? And like, those are phantoms that you can call forward and engage with and have a conversation, and you'd be surprised how quickly most of them go away. Yesterday I suggested having a dialogue with yourself first. Be like, all right, look, you haven't started that exercise plan yet, or you're still not working on your book, and start by saying like, that's okay. It's okay. You're not doing it. That's okay. And then sit down with yourself and really have a conversation like, okay, if I'm not doing that, like, what's really here? Like, what's this about? Let's talk. Like, let's be real with each other, and write or dialogue or have a conversation with somebody that you trust, and try to get to the bottom of what you're afraid of. And if that's something to really be afraid of, failure is one of those phantoms that, like, when you sit down across the table from the idea of failure and you really talk to him, you're like, really? This guy? I'm afraid of this guy? This guy helps me. This guy is the father of innovation. So I'll go into further detail about scanning for myths in the protocol that's written, but essentially it would just be to allow yourself to question how you're thinking about the thing is really how the thing would occur. And we'll also expand on that in step 5 in sketching the ramp, like how to right size or bite size the task so that it then becomes manageable mentally or physically. The next step 3, is expand your perspective. And for that, it kind of builds on the prior step, scanning for myths. And this is where you kind of like reorganize things so that the way that it sits in your head is associated, one, with your identity, your desire, your purpose. I want to do this because it's there for me. I want to do this because somehow, some way, this is refining me. This is a fire that I'm walking through, or this is something I really want to express towards myself. So you connect it with your identity, you update the myths that were wrong, and you look for ways to think about it so that it seems like not so bad and actually just kind of easy. It's crazy the way that language works, and in our filing systems, you can call something by a name and it will literally prohibit you to interact with it neutrally. just by the word that it's around. If you didn't know it was that, you probably have no problem. So that's step 3. So if you're just joining, what I'm talking about today is the Habits of Action Protocol, and I'm running through the 5 steps to get yourself in motion. And I am thrilled to present, I say that somewhat facetiously because it has been like a little bit of a hustle for me to accept that this is the way that I'm going to present this material, because it is a little alternative. But anyhow, so I'm thrilled to present this metaphysically. So basically, how can you think about things? How can you feel about things in a way that changes your behavior? So rather than forcing behavior, which is limited, you have limited will, it's not sustainable. You will always, 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 always remain consistent with your identity. You can change your identity through repetitive behaviors so that you start to identify as someone who does something, but it's much easier to first identify as somebody that does something and then to take the behavior. It's a much longer route to do it manually. So that an example of that would be like, if you think you're somebody that doesn't work out, to train yourself to work out every day is a hustle. But if you could instead consider that it's possible that while you haven't been going to the gym, you do kind of walk here and you do kind of do that. And well, I guess I do sort of like to move around, and well, I guess I kind of do like exercise. And so there's this hurdle that had been impossible to jump over, which now just kind of like toppled. So going back to the steps, that was step 3. Step 4 would be allow alignment. And this is where you kind of just breathe and consider that it's only a matter of time until you do it. And perhaps, and I go into this in the written material and somewhat in the video yesterday, perhaps it's like not the right thing for you to do. Maybe it's an idea that your mind has about what would be right for you, but is not actually something you value. This is really interesting when it comes to something like that you might feel would generate money or physical beauty or relationship. You might have those ideas associated as they might be flagged as essential signs or markers of success, when really you might not have any inherent enjoyment of them. It's like, oh, like nice car. That might be something that you think you need to have to show other people that you're successful, or to show yourself that you're successful, but you might not really care about cars. Maybe you really just like to scoot around on a scooter, Can you allow yourself the freedom to align with what it is you really want and who you really are? But in step 4, allowing alignment, this is a really, this is more like the mood. This is like I said, breathing. It's getting relaxed. It's getting in a state where the next natural step would be the step. So that could be something like you just do things that are easy for you. For example, let's say if somebody really wanted to clean their closet and they've been having resistance for months. What I'd have them do is to have like a tap out button, and so they don't have to finish it, and to organize their mind such that they'll do it in waves. They don't have to do it all at once, and they don't have to decide what they're going to get rid of. They can pile things into maybes, into laters, and allow those to sit at the front door for a certain period of time. And so you just kind of take the pressure off to do the thing in the big way and let yourself do it in the way that's available to you. So with that example, I'd have somebody go do whatever you like to do in your house in a way that kind of buzzes you up. Play a song that you really like, kind of get yourself spun up, and then before you know any better, spin yourself into the closet area, just do shit. It's crazy. It's really wild. You'll see once you've done that once or twice that it's really just your mind that's holding you apart from the action, and nothing else than that. So in step 5, we were sketching the ramp, and like I said, this is kind of the meaty part, and this is, I'm actually in the middle of a presentation. Thank you. But I will be happy to chat with you later. Okay, so I'm on step 5 of the Habits of Action Protocol if you're just joining, and we are sketching the ramp. So like I said, in leading up to this is the okay. I'm in the middle of a presentation. I appreciate that though. Okay, so sketching the ramp is really fun, and honestly, like once you've done this a few times, you'll see how applicable it is to anything that you want to accomplish. So to me, a ramp is a ramp to action. It basically means like you recognize that if you're going 0 miles per hour, it's going to take you a little bit to get to 60. And so rather than set the bar at 60 miles per hour, you let it be 2, and then you let it be 3. And then eventually with the exponential acceleration, it'll be 60. But if you can allow your mind to be organized such that success is marked differently, it makes it much easier to keep that ball rolling. So the first step in sketching a ramp is to kind of allow yourself to acknowledge the magnitude of what you think needs to happen. So you probably, like I've said a few times now, have this organized in your mind in a way that's like massively impossible. So let yourself write out, or whatever way you interact with information best. Maybe you type, maybe you write out what you think needs to happen for this. So maybe your task is you want to reorganize the shed. And so you're like, oh, I have to do these pieces and this piece and this, and I have to call this, blah, 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 blah. So you've got like what you think needs to happen. And then I would ask you to do another block next to that about what's happening right now. And maybe that block says nothing. So maybe you're not doing anything on it. The what are you doing right now block would be more relevant to something like nutrition. If you were bringing nutrition into alignment, or you were bringing a relationship into alignment, you'd want to also like bookmark where you are. And then the next step after that is to identify what actually needs to happen. So we've done what you think needs to happen, what's happening now, and what you think, or what actually needs to happen. So going back to the shed example, there might be 2 or 3 things that actually need to happen right now first, and you kind of pull those out, and then you allow yourself to look through the other things and say like, okay, do I really need to do that? Is that really essential? And you kind of thin it out, and now you've got this stack of what actually needs to happen, and you recognize that over time it's possible that that'll thin further or get longer, and that it's just a draft. So after you've done those 3 blocks, the next block is the tiny block, and you ask what's the tiniest step, next tiniest step that actually needs to happen. And going back to the shed example, it could be a phone call. So you look for the easiest motherfucking thing you could do, and you star that. You say, this is my next step. Something that it's so easy that you could probably be doing it even though you didn't know you were doing it. If you don't have anything like that on your list, add it, and then mark it as done. So all of this is to put yourself in an energetic alignment, identity alignment with the task. We are now pulling you. We are no longer saying that you are apart from this thing. When you're over here and you're saying, I need to do this, I need to do this, essentially what you're saying is, I'm not doing this. And what I'm doing with this protocol is allowing those pieces to come together so that you are saying, I'm doing this. And in that place, you actually do it. It's pretty fucking incredible. So that was the pre-ramp sequence. Now I'm going to talk about the on-ramp sequence, and this is basically a weekly or monthly sketch of the work, quote unquote, that needs to be done. And I suggest having your what actually needs to happen list available, but not plotting that, rather plot circles of time. This is my favorite hack ever. You do, let's say, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I'm writing backwards. So let's say that the task that you're doing, going back to the shed example, is you want to do 3 days per week, and you identify Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as the ones that are most likely for you to be able to do it. Let each of these circles be worth like 10 minutes. That no fucking way. That's how small we're starting. So if you're just joining, what I'm talking about today is the habits of action protocol and how to ramp yourself into doing the things that you couldn't do before. And so maybe if the thing that you're trying to do is exercise, maybe you put these here. And no fucking way, like, I'm not exaggerating. If you were my client, people pay me like each month to tell them stuff like this, I would have you do 5 minutes. That's it. That's how you start. When you start identifying with the activity like you're doing it, then again, like, the resistance narrows and it's not this uphill battle anymore. It's just sort of a natural extension. We know JK, stay consistent with our identity. So you sketch out in the on-ramp portion, sketch out a very small experiment and say, I'm going to see what happens if I try to do 5 minutes per day, or 5 minutes 3 times this week. So let's say Monday happens and you're like, nah. And then Wednesday happens and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then Friday happens and you're like, nah. So an older version of you might look at your week and be like, you messed it up, you didn't do anything. But the new version, the one that's trained on the habitbook.com methodology, would say, oh great, you did 5 minutes more than the week before when you weren't doing shit. Great job. And then they'll say, okay, on that day, what worked? What worked for me then? How can I replicate that? What was I thinking? And when on the days that didn't, you say, that's okay, I didn't do it. And you let it be that. If there's any information on those days, like the time of day didn't work or something else, you can use it. But you don't have to, the other step of this is to pull out all of the emotion. You let everything be data. Data, it's all the same. No data, Monday, didn't take action, no data, that's data. And so what you learned about that was maybe that time of day didn't work for you. Maybe what you learned about that is you really weren't that excited yet to do it. But on Wednesday you did it, and that's okay. And then you set up your next week and you say, this next week I'm going to try 3 minutes because I didn't hit my 5 minute mark. I'm going to try 3 minutes on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday and see what happens. And let's say the first day you do it and you're like, yeah, this works. And then the next 2 you don't. The third week, I would guarantee that you're doing some shit, and it's only because you have taken the pressure off of yourself to do it. 1. 2, you are now in alignment with the identity, because when you reflect back, you've done 10 minutes of something that you couldn't do for a while. And that's when you reflect back, you could be like, okay, like it's not huge, but it's a start and I'm gonna take it. So if you're just joining, what I'm talking about today is the Habits of Action Protocol. And I've gone through the 5 steps already, and we're actually talking about the 5th step right now, which is the ramp sketching. And this is sort of like the actual work that you can do to put things into motion. I've already talked about not using emotion. I'd also suggest, and I say this in pretty much all my presentations, watch your dialogue. Like, you don't need to talk about it anymore. Again, when we go back to this concept of separation, when you're saying there's something I should be, but I'm not. There's something I should be doing, but I'm not. When you say you're not, then you pull yourself out of it, and there's separation. And this space in between is the tension that's holding it apart from you. But if you start to allow yourself to narrow the space by 1, starting to identify as somebody who does it, or 2, reducing the dialogue or the conversation about it, I'm not kidding you, somehow it suddenly becomes easier. Again, I've been doing this for a while. I've worked with people all over the world, really brilliant, successful people who in some areas of their life have had pain or difficulty and just haven't been able to like open that up and really step forward into it because of fear, which is common. Like, we've all had areas where we couldn't move forward, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's like, and maybe this is actually just an amplifier conversation for you. I personally have had a lot of difficulty, taking on some things because of the way that I had been conditioned. So wherever you're starting is perfect, and I really encourage you to respect yourself in that way. So if you're just joining, what I'm talking about today is the Habits of Action Protocol. I've introduced the 5 steps, and right now I'm talking about how to sketch your own action ramp. And it's basically, a ramp is how you break apart your project or pattern. So a pattern would be like productivity oriented, or perhaps it's nutrition oriented, or maybe it's relationship management or something, whereas project would be like a one-time type of thing. And I'm suggesting you break it into like really tiny, beautiful little pieces until you get it off the ground. So the ramp is to help you lift up towards it. It's got a high exponential thing. So in the beginning, it might look like nothing, very little. And then suddenly this little seed breaks ground. And you're like, oh, hey, look, you have leaves. You have a leaf. And then it shoots right up. So the trick in going from no action, no success, to action and to success is to start to let yourself consider if it's possible that you all are already sort of doing the thing. And we do that by making it really easy to hit targets. The last step of the on-ramp portion, or the last thing to consider rather, is that it's kind of exciting when you look back at things that you're already good at or things that you do naturally. Somebody else might think that they're challenging, and you might also have had you might have also had difficulty with, it might have been actually very easy for you to just kind of like do things. And we can forget that you can superimpose that pattern of success on areas that have been challenging. So if you look at places where you're already great, where things are already easy, I suggest copy and pasting what works for you there, what mindset, what belief, what practices are you employing that allow for that to be so natural and easy for you. And I would guess that a good portion of it has to do with that separation component I was talking about earlier, where you don't hold yourself apart from it. You identify with it as possible for you. You allow it to be not something that you talk about as a problem. And so it's just a very natural extension of yourself. So wherever you are great, and I'm sure you're great somewhere, take where you are great, look for what works, and then use that in areas where you're still getting traction. One of the other things you can consider is that maybe you weren't great to start in that area. Perfect. That's another thing you can superimpose, copy and paste that it took some time to be great, and that's okay. So if you're just joining, today I introduced the Habits of Action protocol. So this is the Habits of Action week on the patreon.com/habitbook inner space hub. And on Tuesday, I shared alternative sentences, and those are basically meditations. They're affirmative-ish, except for that they are designed to pull or tug on threads of things you already believe. So sometimes affirmations can come across as like forceful or like wishful or hopeful. And again, that's like that separation component. And so everything that I'm doing is basically saying like, you got it. Like you're already there. You just have to update your mind to recognize that you're already there. And I can hear where in some areas that doesn't necessarily resonate as possible for you. But if you message me, I would be happy to help you walk your mind back to that place so that you can kind of see what I mean. So any personal examples that you have where you're not sure how to fit this material to, for God's sake, send me a message. I went through the 5 steps of the protocol today and talked about how to kind of, it's almost like you're revving your engine to allow for yourself to do what's natural. Did anyone have any questions so far? It's a smaller room today. I've never done it at this time. Robert, are you there? Okay. So I'm going to run through the steps as a recap, and then we'll close for today. If any of this material has been helpful for you, you can check out the rest of this week's content on patreon.com/habitbook, or some of the material is still posted on IG. Next week we are talking about relationships, transparent communication in your interpersonal dynamics, so how to really speak your truth and for allowing that to be safe and right for you. And then the final week of this month content is about being an executive producer. And I find that a lot of the people that come into my world are doing like incredible things and have like these beautiful gifts inside of themselves that they are learning how to let out. And so that will be how to support connecting with and using your voice, your own unique voice, and feeling confident and comfortable to do that, and different practices you can put in place to surrender to the unfolding of that journey. So going back to this, the 5 steps, the 5 steps for today, we've got restore your identity, remember who the fuck you are. And by that, I basically mean relax away from the idea that you need to do anything to be other than you are. And step 2, scan for myths to bust. And that basically means, how is the thing organized in your mind in a way that makes it unmanageable or unapproachable or even like just distasteful to do. So those are all task dysmorphia things, but it might also be a myth about yourself. You can't do this, you're not this. Or it could be a myth about the world where you think A, B, C needs to happen to get to D. But is that true? So with myths, you basically sit down, you have a conversation with yourself, and you say, self, I love you so much. I see you're not doing that thing. That's okay. Let's talk about it. What's here for you? And you really you kind of therapist yourself by not trying to change what you think, just really trying to hear what you think. And as you have that conversation, things will come forward and you'll be like, okay, wait. I thought that made sense, but is that really truly generating the result I want? In step 3, you expand your perspective, and that basically means that you allow for the new orientation of the idea to take root in your mind, and there are a few different tactics that we can use for that. Basically, I think the most useful one is kind of like stretching definitions, so or concepts. So you might have a definition about what cooking looks like that is intimidating to you. Maybe you could stretch the definition to include something else, and so then again you start to identify with the thing. And that's really our goal with the protocol, is to put you again, we're closing separation. We're saying you're no longer saying I'm not doing this, I'm not that. You are allowing for it to come together. And that's step 4, allow alignment. And in step 5 is sketching the ramp. And that was the last piece I went over. And this is the really fun part of how to break apart what you're doing in a way that makes it mentally digestible and kind of fun to tackle. And you run it like an experiment. You see what works, and you use the data that's generated on your ramp. And you say okay, on this day I didn't do it. That's okay. Was there any information that would help me understand that better? And if there is, great. If there's not, great. On days you do it, you ask the same questions. How can I better understand what worked here? How can I replicate that? And you just allow, you kind of going back to the expand your perspective, you might expand your definition of success to be inclusive of a larger timeline. Perhaps you find that you had pinned success on a certain time frame that is actually just kind of arbitrary, and the pressure of that arbitrary deadline is holding you apart from it because you're not sure if you can hit it. So take the deadline off. What the fuck? Why do you need a deadline? With the ramp, outside of, so that to me would be staying outside of your head. Beyond that, I suggested that you mind your dialogue, keep it very simple, very clean, very supportive. Try not to talk about your problem at all. And I know that seems counter, have conversations with yourself, but when you're constantly saying, I have this problem, I'm not this thing, I'm not doing this thing, I'm not doing this thing, then you are reinforcing that as your reality. And is that the reality that you really want to build? So if you can, just kind of either stop those sentences entirely, outside and inside, or rewrite them so that they have a growth mindset, a growth orientation to them. The last part I think is really cool is just consider it's possible after you've done this, your natural state is growth, and so you will naturally push yourself after you feel more comfortable in it. It's I think of bicycling. It's at first it's oh my god, my legs, oh my god. But if you bike for a few weeks or a few months, it's fun to push yourself. We like to push ourselves. We like to grow. And so it might initially seem that this is not enough. I'm suggesting very small times, very small chunks of time as effort, very small effort. And your mind might be bitch, you'll never get anywhere like that. But having facilitated behavior change for this long, like, you got to trust me. And if not, like, run your own experiment. Don't trust me. Don't trust me at all. Like, experiment with this. See if this works for you. But what I found with the people that I've worked with, it does make a difference. You just make it be easy. And as it gets easy and you feel comfortable, then you start to like reach for more, because that's who we are. That's what's fun, growing. So that concludes the habits of action protocol for this week. I will be posting the article that is supportive of this. So basically, if you're not following me on patreon.com/habitbook yet, each of these videos, patrons get the video plus a summary text of what was covered, so that, you know, based on what time they have, they can kind of like scan, get the gist. And then tomorrow I do the 10-minute recap, the Friday 10-minute recap of the content, and that sort of being like, hey, if you only have 10 minutes this week to invest in yourself, like, these are things to kind of open the door for new information to come through. Does anyone have any questions?